For our afternoon section, I'm delighted to welcome Lauren Baker, Deputy Director of the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, on stage to steward our next discussion on concrete strategies for scaling TCA implementation.
Thanks so much, Joanne. And my sense of the momentum that's building right now is that this afternoon in particular, and as we take the work forward as a community over the next months to define the action plan that Jen and Joanne and the team are kind of pulling together from the inputs that we're providing, is that we want to hold on to this idea of scale. What do we mean by scaling implementation? And we have this fantastic panel who are going to touch on this from their own experience, different dimensions, talking about different dimensions of scale. I thought it would be useful as I was kind of listening to the conversation today and in the small groups. I thought it would be useful, even just for myself, I began thinking, like, what have we learned at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food about scale? How have we thought about scaling over the years that we've been doing our work in collaboration with many of you, in collaboration with other partners across a number of issue areas? And so I also want to hold on to, remind ourselves that we're looking to, in talking about scaling true cost accounting, we're talking about shifting from 12 trillion in costs annually to almost like an infinite value of positive benefits, right? Biodiversity, how do we monetize this? Soil health, the regeneration of our economies. And we need to be focused on what it means to scale this, really shift these negative impacts from food systems and translate them. I mean, this is the gift of food systems transformation, is that much of that can be transformed into positive benefits that are beyond value. So we have done some work over the years to look at like many of you, I'm sure, to look at the systems change literature. How do we understand historically how significant transformations have occurred? And of course, really briefly, like one kind of group of literature that all of you have looked at is the GEALS literature around socio-political or socio-technological transformations. And we did some early work, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, through our Beacons of Hope work, to really understand and kind of translate that very academic literature into, a bit of a theory of change around scale and systems transformation. We wanted to learn from initiatives that were really deeply transformational. What can we learn from these initiatives around the world? I'll just say like a couple of elements of these things. I'm not going to give you a big lecture on scale, but one of the things that I think is really important to hold on to as we think about this collectively is the political economy. Like all of this work happens, of course, in a political economic context. This interaction between specific initiatives that you're all leading and the broader global political economy. And that is actually really dynamic in this transformation process. In the GEAL framework as well, we have, established niche initiatives proliferating. As they mature, they begin to confront policies and practices, they build legitimacy, and they begin to anchor institutionally. And all of this is very cyclical. It's not linear. It happens cyclically. And so how do we understand that cyclical change process? And, I'd love our panel to reflect on this. Other work that we've done is to really understand our evidence. Our members have asked us, like, you're talking about agroecology. Like, what is the evidence for a shift to regenerative approaches? How do we understand the evidence? And what are the questions that hold back change? And I think, this morning in particular, I feel like our panel and the conversations were really addressing these questions. But how do we continue to address them to build the case? Can the new food system we're moving to feed the world? Can the initiatives that we're working on be scaled? What does that look like? How do we think about all these multidimensional elements of scale? Can they provide meaningful livelihoods and jobs? Can they solve the soil biodiversity, health, and climate crises? Can they accelerate transformation? I mean, our panel this morning really addressed this. So this is about mobilizing diverse evidence and communicating that evidence. And how do we think about that in the scale as we talk about scaling implementation? And it's a call to action. And also for our panel, I'd like you to think about this. How do you understand and communicate the evidence for change? And then the final thing, recently, I've been really interested in more ecological metaphors for scaling processes. And I want to talk about, in the translation of those ecological metaphors, where I think we've actually been very successful in this conversation, and where we may have work to do. So in an ecological metaphor, people talk about rooting and scale. So the deeper the roots, the more a system can change and hold. And in this, I would like to ask, some of you have been part of this conversation for maybe the last decade and beyond. And then others of you are really new to this conversation. I mean, who feels like they're entering into this conversation as somebody new to the TCA community? Don't be shy. Yes, yes. And in a scaling process, we need all of you to become champions and to make that entry easy and welcoming. And so you're welcome in this community, and we can't be frustrated in this scaling process, because we want to reach far beyond these walls and engage our communities in understanding where we need to move from and how we're moving to this new food system with all of its positive values. So this is about rooting and networking, of course. I'm thinking about how we're networked. And I think we've done a good job, too, in building networks. All of you are part of incredibly strong networks, have very deep relationships, important collaborations, and you're coordinating in many ways across boundaries. There's also an element of germination in scale, quiet incubation and emergence. And this is, of course, also the GIL, like niche, some of these niche initiatives. And we heard about this morning, like we need many prototypes generated. We don't want to have really fixed boundaries around these prototypes. We want them to proliferate, because from this germination, some seeds will be planted and really flourish. So maybe talking about, in your scaling experience, how you see this idea of germination and flourishing. And then where I think there are three areas where I think we have work to do, and I'd love you to talk about this as well. I'm like giving you work that we haven't done before, but I think it's going to be in your presentations. One is this idea of like scaling through non-linear leaps, like back to this more cyclical momentum. We're in a very unique moment in relation to the political economy. Crisis equals opportunity. Is this a moment actually to think about a non-linear leap in this work, where we can really make the case together for a different level of impact? And I've heard some of this in the conversation, that potentially, yes, it is. In that, I think there's work to do around bridging, translation, and connection. This is a communications function, but it also involves bringing different worlds together. And how might we think about that more systemically and more intentionally? And then another element of our conversation, which I've been really interested in, is sort of this idea of coding, this visionary space, which is about behavior and mindset shift. Like, I think the power and potential of true cost accounting is actually in this aspirational mindset shift to invite people to think more holistically. Yes, it's about metrics and data and frameworks, all very, very important, because it addresses important things like greenwashing and, holds us true to the important work we have to do. But it is also about convincing people that we need to move from a narrow thinking to more holistic thinking, and that this is important to solve our global crises around climate, biodiversity, equity, all the things. So, how do we think about mindset shift and how does that happen? I'm really interested and curious. So we're going to hear from 3 people. We're going to be inspired, I hope, by your scaling implementation work. And then I do want to open it up and really hear from you, like, yes, questions to the panel, but also I want to hear from you, like, where do you think this work needs to go? How do we take it forward collectively as a community? What are some of the ideas that have been germinating here in our time together that we might take forward? So with that, I'll introduce the panel. We're going to start, I think I'll introduce everybody, but we'll start with Claire van den Broek with True Price. Claire and True Price have been long-standing partners in the True Cost Accounting work with the Accelerator and the Global Alliance, and have done really interesting work, both on the kind of consulting side, but also on the advocacy and policy side. So really interested and thinking about consumer engagement as well. So we'll hear from Claire in just a minute. Carlo Azzari is with IFPRI. And Carlo, I remember meeting with IFPRI partners around the work on True Cost Accounting that you've led, sustainable agriculture and food systems. I think you're going to share some work that you've led and done in Kenya to really understand costs, benefits, policy shifts, the kind of how do we understand this context at the national level? And then we'll hear from Dimitri Zaganstev, sort of got that right, who is with the FAO. And so here, we're talking about this institutional anchoring. You're working regionally, if I understand it correctly, and in Europe and Central Asia. So how do we understand these dynamics in a regional context and understand the policy and economic levers that we can use in our collective conversation for scaling implementation? So with that, Claire, I'll invite you up.
All right. Thank you, Lauren. I feel like I need to restructure my entire presentation and ask ChatGPT for all the answers. I think it knows quite a bit. But just to check, I mean, we're the first presentation after lunch. Is everybody still sort of happy and energized? Or is everybody feeling like a little bit of a after lunch dip? Let me know. Happy? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, so yeah, to jump into it, I'll tell a little bit about True Price and what we've done in the past, a bit of the, just touch upon it briefly, and then go into one of the sort of projects of sort of a full circle system change within just one industry. Which we really engaged with different partners to see, can we create sort of a prototype for system change? And how can we then engage with all these actors to make this a lasting change? So we'll get into that in a bit. To start off with, True Price was founded in 2012. We're a social enterprise and a foundation, both. And our mission is to make healthy and sustainable food accessible and to create a just economy that fits within the planetary boundaries. It's been quite a ride. I joined about 4 years ago, so I haven't been there for the long haul. But True Price was founded in 2012. After that, several studies already started on national, international level. With the Chocoloni, Tony Chocoloni, for example, True Price of cacao, True Price of coffee. The roadmap for True Pricing was launched. And then sort of fast forward a bit to where I know more about is in 2021, we were part of the scientific paper for the UNFSS. As of that, we also saw in the Netherlands a lot of more adaptation in practice. So we saw it in the Netherlands at least picked up, also becoming more visible for consumers. The True Price Standard was created together with Wageningen University and others. I think for us a highlight was the publication also in the New York Times earlier in November, showing really the hidden cost of the certain food, giving attention to that. So, well, you know this. So for us, we say true price, we take the retail price as a given. And then on top of that, we look at the environmental and social costs. And the idea is not to make everything more expensive, but to make everything more sustainable. So really to hand over tools based on transparency. So companies, but all actors in the value chain sort of get tools to reduce these external costs and implement different strategies. So this can be from changing your sort of margin framework as a company to get a bit more margin, maybe on the unhealthy product and a bit less on the healthy and sustainable ones, but also redirecting consumer behavior towards more sustainable, towards more sustainable consumption. As said, we, together with Wageningen and others, we created the True Price method work with sort of modules on different impacts that is accessible, open on the website. And now we dive into the banana value chain because we eat an amazing amount of bananas altogether. I think I read it was like 100 billion bananas we eat as a global community every year. So it's immense. And there's a lot of hidden cost in the banana value chain. There's not enough transparency in there. So the goal was really to introduce true pricing in 2 banana value chains to sort of create a systemic approach for value chain actors to be able to make this value chain more sustainable. And we did that with a lot of partners, and to start with organic bananas. But the idea is to make that that you can copy it so that other value chains can use it, but also other banana producers. And then the project consists of 2 phases. So phase A is really looking at what are these external costs, and the next one is how do you what sort of remediation strategies can you use for that? And phase B just recently started, but we already have some first results, and it's really how to implement this and how do you then actually reduce these value chain. So it's a really long-term project that started 5 years ago, and it will continue on and on. So it's really an implementation of true cost accounting. The EU, well, said here, lots of bananas are exported and eaten. The EU is one of the biggest, biggest countries or biggest continents of the import of bananas. And we did this to get sort of the full scope of the value chain. We did this with a lot of value chain partners, and also the Dutch government was involved in this. And 2 of the largest, the largest 2 organic supermarket chains in the Netherlands. So there's around 300 stores throughout the Netherlands that joined. And then also all the actors, so the farmers were involved, but also the cooperatives in between. And so we went with all these partners on farm level to get primary data of these different, of the bananas on the banana farm. And what we saw is the true price of the Dominican Republic banana was around €1.76 higher per kilogram than the retail. So the true price gap was €1.67. And it was mainly driven by environmental cost and then also mainly driven by water use. So 70% of this was environmental cost. And the banana from Peru was a bit lower true price gap, so 83 cents, and then with a lot lower environmental costs. So those were, that sort of caught the attention of everyone immediately. The difference that first of all, environmental costs were really the biggest driver, and secondly, that there was also quite a difference. And it was mainly driven by water use, as said. And what happened, for example, in the Dominican Republic, that was close by the banana plantations there were close by a dam. And what they did, if they needed to water the plants, they would just open it, retracting really all water and sort of drinking water for communities, really creating a lot of impact on the use of scarce water. So that's why the impact was so big on that. And then on social costs, we also saw, still quite a gap on living income, especially in Peru. So, okay, well, that's great. I'll do my best. But that's great. Yeah, we have these insights. We know now that there's a lot of problems in this value chain. So what are we going to do with it? So together we created we went through this circle, this framework, where we said, this is the true cost. What projects do we know? Farmers know so much that can reduce these costs. And how much will it reduce? And we will also be tracking this. So the remediation work is now starting. So it's going to be a renewal of plantations, leveling of soil, investment in an irrigation system, which will have the largest gain to be expected from this water use. Intercropping, because there's a lot of disease happening because we all eat the same type of banana, causing a lot of disease. And then if one disease is there, it spreads, through all these banana plantations, causing lower yield, causing lower income for the farmers. So intercropping is also one of that's both on environmental and social side, really relieving some of these external costs. But then all of this costs money, right? So who is going to pay for this? And I think that's a question we continuously ask ourselves here, like somebody is going to pay for it. I mean, we are already paying for it. Future generations will definitely start paying for it even more. But if you want to do these remediations, how are we going to do that? So first of all, I think an important step was that the normal time for a contract in the banana industry is a 3-month contract with the farmers. So that's no ground for a farmer to really start investing in your farm if you don't have if you don't have the confidence that you in next year will also have somewhere to place your bananas. So what the retailers did was really work towards a 5-year contract. So now they have 5-year contracts with their banana plantations. So they know we can invest. So they give some room also for the farmers to invest themselves. Supermarkets and traders are investing. Government is investing a bit in it. And this is also somewhere where the consumers actually paid a little bit more during an action week, which was 2 weeks ago. So in all 300 locations, with this knowledge, the bananas were sold for 50 euro cents extra. So they were 50 euro cents more expensive during this week at all 300 locations. And first of all, it gained lots of media attention. But what we found was an unexpected outcome is that sales increased with 20%. So all 300 locations sold 20% more bananas than as a reference week. And what happens with that income is it will be placed in a revolving fund. So a fund that is meant for the farmers to have these remediation projects. It will go from one farm to the next. So it will be invested in one farm, yield will go up. It's somewhat of a loan. After a while, the funds will flow back into revolving fund and it will move forward and grow with the funding from the consumers. This week will be repeated a couple of times throughout the year. With funding from the retailers who also place funding in this revolving fund and some funds for the governments. And the idea is then the gap will be lower. So you can also show over time that you are reducing these external costs with the bananas. And that's also something that we'll be tracking throughout the years. Yeah, and that's just one of the examples that is happening in the Netherlands. I just want to briefly, because we're talking about scaling, and what the term sort of we use at True Price is we say, well, the scaling is all in the system acupuncture. So we're going to look at the pain in the system, and that's where we're going to sort of prick our needles to relieve the pain in this system. And that's on consumer level, on retailer level, producer level, and government level. And one of the things is, for example, the government of the Netherlands, some different ministries have been picking up true pricing as part of their procurement strategy, really moving forward the adaptation of true pricing with companies. Now making sure that 50 plus and growing hundreds of locations this year, you will have a true price lunch. So at your canteen, like at FAO, then you will have next to the salad, you will see the true price of the salad and the true price of your lasagna. So as a consumer, you can also choose the more sustainable option. True pricing is going to be part of the high school examination as of 2027. So it's going to be part of the economic, the new generation will learn about external costs. So we don't have to go backwards to learn them again after they finish sort of their higher education, which I think is a really, really big step forward. Yeah, it's part of the procurement strategy. Then there's several publications. I think all of us really contributed to that to make sure that there's more visibility out there in the great work that is happening in this community. In the Netherlands, the competition law also included true pricing. So you can, like these retailers did, you can work together as companies. There's no sort of price element there where you can either hide behind or use as why not to start with true cost accounting and true pricing. And maybe a last one is that over the past year we had 3 motions in Parliament that were based on true pricing put forward. And yesterday, while we are having quite a conservative government, one of these motions was accepted that the government needs to look into how you can relieve the sort of abundance of evidence that you need to show as a sustainable company and the costs that go with that, but really put that more towards the polluter organization. So they need to show how they can be more sustainable. So those, and that's one that was accepted, and true cost accounting is part of that. So they say, the government says, use true cost accounting to give that insight. So that's, we were really happy with that yesterday. Finally, what we do, and I think that's also part of scaling, is showing by doing. So really with the global partnership with 140 members, we really want to create pilots. There's some members also in this room and show that it can be done and use that towards government, towards consumers, and join forces in that, just like we are doing here. And that's it. So if you want to learn more, we'll start the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire, and congratulations too on the motion that passed yesterday. I think it's really significant. And my observation in listening to you is that you've used communication so strategically in your work as a way to engage people in the conversation, in the place where they're shopping. And also obviously engage the political processes. So you're approaching policy in a way I don't think we've really had in conversation about in this community. Like, how do you actually get this on our elected officials, elected leaders' agendas to bring it forward into the system? So it's really exciting. We're going to, I think, now move to Dimitri. So yeah, even though I introduced you, the slides are, yeah. I think they'll do the slides.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
here they come.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank Jen and her team, wonderful team, for organizing this summit. And I'm very much happy to work with you and Andrea together last year, preparing SOFA 2024 and contributing to the task force. Thank you for the opportunity to connect with the topic. And I will provide a brief description of some activities that we have completed last year and the activities that we are planning for the next biennium. And pretty much my purpose here is to inform you and to actually invite your suggestions for any ideas for perhaps more impactful activities that we can undertake, or maybe any other recommendations are welcome. So please, everyone, catch me after the session. I'm more than happy to take the notes. You can also find me by email and send those. I would like to start with general statistics from SOFA 2024. Sorry. You know the figure that global true costs are estimated approximately $10 trillion annually, with 70% linked to unhealthy dietary patterns. Our FAO region for Europe and Central Asia contribution is less than $3 trillion with the health component approximately 80%. If you look at the countries level, we see that with respect to total hidden costs, the total figure is attributed to Russian Federation. But if we take a group of the countries like European Union, Russia and the European Union in this case compose a group approximately with 60% of total hidden cost. The same picture for the total hidden costs, health-related hidden costs, where Russia and European Union comprise the group approximately with 60% of that cost, and the same with the environmental hidden cost, where Russia and the European Union. If we take a broader perspective, the European Union is working very hard with the pre-accession countries of our region, that the Western Balkan countries, for instance, and Russia is working inside of the Eurasian Economic Union, and together, so European Union and Eurasian Economic Union, that would be approximately 80% of all total hidden costs. So in this case, our work, we see strategically to work together with the European Union to improve the situation with the countries of the Western Balkans, for instance. And then we also should be strategically engaged in the dialogue with the Eurasian Economic Union and Commission. In this case, working with the countries of Central Asia, Russian Federation, Armenia, also improving the situation. SOFA 2024 includes an annex, as you know, presenting country-level estimates for total hidden costs, broken down into health, environmental, and social components. More detailed insights actually available through country-specific true cost accounting assessments. And for SOFA 2024, we're engaged also in the preparation of the case studies, one for Central Asia and another for South Caucasus. Using the hidden cost accounting methodology, Westminster University in Uzbekistan provided some illustrative estimates of the true price, combining market price and hidden costs for selected agricultural commodities. I'm going to present quickly a few slides of examples of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, just to showcase different commodities and the hidden cost compared to the market price. On this picture, you see the example from Tajikistan. We take cotton as a good example for them, with high greenhouse gas emission component, pesticide pollution, and fertilizer leakage. For Turkmenistan, we can take wheat as a good example of very high hidden cost, with the highest components as a blue water use, pesticide pollution, and waste and greenhouse gas emissions. For Uzbekistan, I already mentioned cotton and wheat in previous slides, so I'm taking example of watermelon, for instance, and with respect to watermelon, the main components of emissions would be, will be greenhouse gas emissions and waste. We're not making too many conclusions at the moment. This is the first-hand data just to start the discussion with policymakers, but also with the experts, just on expert level, actually, to apply the methodology itself and to learn. So it's more for learning purpose. But we also see the possibility to start the discussion in the direction of perhaps moving to crop diversification from high hidden cost commodities like cotton and wheat, but also working on how to improve the situation if the commodity is a critical commodity for the country. Another case study from Georgia is focusing on health dimension only. Just the conclusions that I would like to highlight. For Armenia, approximately double the recommended maximum intake of salt is taking place, with about half of the recommended intake of fruits and vegetables. For Azerbaijan, sugar consumption exceeding the norms, and low fruit and vegetable consumption among the children. I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation that one of my main goals was to come to network with colleagues, and I'm very much happy for that experience. I really enjoy that, but also I wanted to inform you about the activities undertaken so far by us and share our reflections on the way forward, and ask for your guidance on how to prioritize or shape impactful actions for the next biennium. I'm just briefly mentioning you what we have done in 2024. We contributed to develop SOFA 2024 case studies. We also supported a number of TSA-themed events in our region. One of them was side event during the 34th Regional FAO Regional Conference for Europe, taking place here in Rome, actually. Then during the regional technical workshop on transforming agri-food systems in Europe and Central Asia, where we had serious participation from the government officials, from the ministers of agriculture and health from the countries of the region. We had also the session on True Cost Accounting. And then we also supported a regional think lab meeting. This is a meeting of technical officers of the region, of our region for Europe and Central Asia, where we also more or less informed about SOFA 2024 outcomes and the theme on True Cost Accounting. So the colleagues are also more or less will be the members of our team. I'm very glad to report that we found it very much useful that we start translating documents in Russian language, that increased the accessibility of the material. But we also see that, of course, making it in the language of the country would be another step forward, and that's what we will be considering later. In the next slide, you will see perhaps developing some material in Turkish or Albanian, Serbian. So in this case, the country experts could also be engaged in heavier discussions. Together with SOFA team and Andrea's team in this case, I am very much thankful. They provided the templates and information for the country briefs that we also prepared in English and Russian language that we distributed during the side event. And this document is well received, and we continue receiving emails occasionally to share perhaps the updated version. The data from TSA case studies, but also so far 2024 data on true cost accounting is used by the colleagues working on common country analysis reports. And we are so much happy that they do it. This is the team of civil servants from countries of the region, from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Albania, Georgia. And that was the opportunity for us to present the topic of true cost accounting and pitch the idea and to see the reflection. With respect to the steps forward, I'm outlining 3 elements. And I welcome your suggestions and insights on that. First, we would like to definitely to continue work on helping countries to integrate true cost accounting in national and regional strategic planning and policies. That means helping them to conduct comprehensive true cost accounting assessments, and that would be our first idea. We supported the Central Asian countries and South Caucasus. We are hoping to be able to make a study for the Western Balkans. So in this case, that would summarize 3 studies, and perhaps with the regional paper on top of that, that would be our idea to move forward with that work. We also would like to continue working with the governments, of course, in the region to facilitate the integration of true cost accounting in national and regional strategies. This year, we have 2 entry points. Serbia is developing its new agriculture and rural development strategy, and Tajikistan is developing new food security program. In both documents, we're expecting that true cost accounting is reflected and discussed by the experts and reflected in the document. The second point, we would like to continue working with the countries to promote repurposing of the subsidies and support mechanisms to sustainable farming practices that reduce hidden costs, but also working on the data and statistics. And with respect to the third element, I was mentioning that our interest, of course, to continue producing technical material and publications, trying to translate it in different languages and focusing maybe on the languages of different countries, so we can see the uptake of that material from the country experts or NGOs. We have a special platform, a green agriculture platform with the policy section where we plan to upload those type of publications. And this is a platform that is already accessed by the experts, NGOs all over our region. This platform is called Regional Technical Platform on Green Agriculture. This is it from my side. I would like to thank you, and I welcome your suggestions and recommendations and insights after our session or after once we complete our speeches. I'm happy to make a note and definitely integrate your ideas in our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. And maybe in the discussion, you can tell us about how you're making links with colleagues to integrate this into the national plans, the NBSOPs, the NDCs, how if the national food strategy. So just curious about how people are engaging with the true cost accounting work that you've led. All right, over to you, Carlo. Go ahead. Really looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you for inviting me as and my colleagues that couldn't come to the meeting. Was great. So I'm gonna present some few slides on the IFPRI's work on true cost accounting. And the talk is focusing on Kenya and Vietnam, where we collected data. So these are joint work with my colleague Rui Benfica and Christine Davis, whom some of you know for previous work. Yeah, don't get scared about the outline because I'm gonna skip most of it. And I can skip also this slide. I realized that I just copied from the True Price, and there was a watermark, so I'm completely cheating. So this I don't need to tell you this point what the True Cost Accounting is. But I mostly use this slide to show off my kids what I'm doing, right? And I'm very impressed. They're very impressed because they don't know that the graph is not mine. It's from the True Price Coalition. So we start from definitions, right? So we need to define what we are looking at, the products, the crops, the food groups, because that's crucial. Otherwise, we'll be shooting in the dark at what we're going to collect and analyze. Then of the scope of the impact. So here we collected data not only for the True Cost Accounting, but also for the initiative. So we are trying to evaluate before and after, because this is part of. So the data we collected is part of initiative, of two initiatives actually, that have been merged into one now. It's called Multifunctional Landscape, where we looked at agroecology practices and nature-based practices. And we collected data before these initiatives take place in these locations. So, and that's why we define the scope of the impact, where we look at environmental, social, and also health impact for that project. I will present in a minute what I mean by that. Then, of course, we monetize. We try to monetize using the TIP framework, all the components of the True Price. And then we of course produce an analysis, because that's what we do for a living. We're a research institution, and more importantly, we engage with policymakers. So at this now we have done twice, once in Kenya and the second time in Vietnam. But we would like to do it also not in a capital city, but also at the local level, because we would like to mostly involve policymakers into sensitizing. At this point, my kids are ready to fall asleep, so you can do the same here. So the main question we would like to answer is, what is the true cost of food production? Of course, taking into account the externalities that we talked about. But also what and how can policy and investment be driven by this analysis, and how we can reduce this cost, as in the case of what Claire just showed before. Not only to increase sustainability, but also to improve equity in the agri-food system. So we divided the analysis essentially in two parts. One is at the national level, and the second part is taking advantage of the data we collected at the macro level in the two countries. So looking at the global impact database, we looked at all sectors, and we realized that the total external cost, so the ratio between the external cost over the value of production of output produced, is about 35%. I mean, overall, nationwide in Kenya, as opposed to 15% in Vietnam. And you can, in the second box, you can see the ranking of the sectors that contribute the most to the external cost. And in Kenya is livestock, cereals and legume, vegetable, etc. While in Vietnam, as expected, is paddy rice, processed rice, and also other processed food. The major externality type, and that's where the analysis gets into more interesting findings, is that the environmental cost, while in Kenya contribute only for 27% to the total external cost, they contribute 75%, so 3/4 of the external cost in Vietnam are attributable to the environment. And the situation is completely flipped, because if you look at social cost in Kenya, is about, again, 3/4, while it's 1/4 for Vietnam for social costs. So we would like to essentially in our micro level data collection, we would like to validate these figures from the national level to the more local, to the project level, right? So in the areas where we intervened, and looking at the major externality source in Kenya. So for simplicity, we we marked in red the social externalities, while we mark in green, of course, in greenwashing, the environmental externalities. So as you can see, the underpayment and child labor in Kenya are the highest social costs, although they are completely the opposite again in Vietnam. So they are the lower scale. And of course, the environment, as I was telling you, is more important in Vietnam. Now, going to the analysis at the micro level, so at the farm level, in the initiative targeted areas, that in Kenya we targeted three counties, and in Vietnam 2 districts. The first the first interesting and probably most important thing to note is the absolute value, right? So the absolute value, and these values are in purchasing power parity per household. The absolute value of direct cost is about 700 PPP in Kenya, while more than 3,000 in Vietnam. Interesting enough, we have, and of course, we looked at environmental costs and social costs. We had instrument at the farmer level. So we had instrument both at the farmer level, though, and at the worker level to look at the social cost. And I will tell you in a minute what we collected. And the situation here is that it is similar to what we saw from the global impact database, so that social costs are much higher than environmental costs in absolute level, in absolute terms in Kenya. And of course, I mean, in absolute terms compared to Vietnam are lower, but compared to the environmental costs are much higher. While again, the opposite occurs in Vietnam, and in percentages. And in percentages, of course, within the country, then you can see the 20%, 25%. So again, 1/4. Oh, wow, your watch is running faster than mine. So 1/4 of the social costs in Kenya, and as opposed to 9% only in Vietnam, again, and the opposite for environmental costs. So let me rush a little bit. So here we try to unpack the sources of the external cost. Again, on the left-hand side, you see the Kenya factors, components, and Vietnam is on the right. Again, you can see forced labor, child labor are highest in Kenya, while land occupation and soil degradation are highest in Vietnam. So I'm not saying anything new and different from what the GID database was telling us. Here I will skip through because this is just a spin-off of the study, looking at true price of coffee in Kenya, but I don't have time to show you. So let me jump to the conclusions. Again, the Kenya experienced very high social externalities, and they are mostly related to labor intensity, and their environmental costs are relatively lower because of the lower use of chemical inputs, right? We know that there are violations related to forced labor, also the underpayment in the job market, health and safety of the workers, for which we have a dedicated survey instrument, because we sampled workers on purpose to look at conditions in the workplace. Again, environment is relatively lower. For Vietnam, the situation is completely the opposite. So we have very high externalities, mostly due to the intensive agricultural practices and extensive use of chemicals and fertilizer. I mean, I guess due to the green revolution, as you all know. The social issues are relatively lower. Yes, there is an underpayment, and also there is a higher level of informality, but not as high, again, as in the comparison with Kenya. And environmental, of course, is also soil degradation, as we saw among the components. Now, implication for the study, for policy. Well, we think we need to train and empower farm workers, especially in Kenya, as we saw, to address the social impact. So we would like to work with the worker association and unions to increase collective bargaining, such that they become more, become stronger to negotiate the fair wages, right? And to increase also the respect for labor rights that are largely not respected, but also to develop local grievance mechanisms that are largely absent from the labor market. I mean, especially especially in Kenya. Then the second is to strengthen smallholder performance, but this is a no-brainer. We have been talking about this for the last 2 days, and we can do this through agricultural practices and adaptive strategies. Again, technology transfer play a great role, but also income and crop diversification. Finally, challenges, especially from the data we collected. I mostly would like to highlight 2 challenges. One is related to data. So in collecting data at the micro level, of course, if we would like to capture environmental, social, and by the way, we haven't even captured health impacts, that it will be even more complicated. We need to increase the interview time for the farmers, and this particularly burdensome for many of them because they need to work, etc. So they have opportunity cost to answer to our question, right? And then, of course, the data quality decreases as the interview time increases. And also, we touched upon, especially for social issues, we touched upon very culturally sensitive issues. So we needed to be very careful in asking about harassment in a workplace, of sexual harassment, especially. So, and these questions in many contexts could be particularly sensitive and prone to tension. I mean, of course, we kept the interviewer separate from by gender, so husband and wife, etc., so to avoid any breach of confidentiality. Then there is a big issue, especially in Vietnam, for finding a subsample of workers. So strangely enough, there were no workers around, but was not even at the time of the harvest, because we're at this point unsure about why they didn't have workers working for the household, is because it's not that common in the 2 provinces. So we needed to sample workers of course, to ask about working conditions, but it was very hard to find workers that work for the farmer. Then there is, of course, the issue of health indicators that I was talking to you about. So we haven't even touched upon. So in our next iteration, we'll also include health indicators. Finally, policy engagement. So in our experience with policymakers, there is a higher sensitivity to social issues. So whenever we talked about harassment, sexual harassment in the workplace, child labor, forced labor, they recognize the issue, but they didn't want to talk about it. So there is a lot of there is awareness, but in reality, they are silent about this. And then the legislation is there. So the legislation, the problem there is just that there is no enforcement, right? And this is for the social issue. For the environmental issues, they're relatively safer, more accepted, even in Vietnam, where again environmental issues are more high for the externalities. And then finally, our plan that will be this year, next few months, is to have policy engagement at the local level, dialogues in the community where we collected the data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlo. And I think those last few slides really demonstrate how challenging it is to mitigate some of the externalities, especially the social externalities through regulation, policy, education, legislation, all the things, right? And that's enforcement. So there are a lot of challenges there. And so really thinking through how to create a process of engagement like you're doing. So this session is about, and what we've heard from our 3 panelists is really talking about scaling implementations and strategies to do that. I would like to open it up to all of you for both questions, but also maybe your own reflections on strategies that you've used to scale your own work. And then the next session, the session that follows, we're teeing up a kind of collective conversation about where this will go, that in terms of the broader ideas. But I would like to hear from you any questions and reflections you have for the three panelists, and then also your reflections from your own work on the strategies that have worked for scaling implementation. Yes. Osha, I think that's you back there. Maybe not.
Hello, somebody has to be first. I'm Linda Lönnqvist. I work in Mexico. And this is one of those questions, reflections. That's more reflection than question, I'm sorry. Carlos' presentation reminded me of work that I've also done in Kenya with about green and decent work. And we found that the way people make this happen for themselves is on a very small scale level, very community-based, through networks, knowing each other. If you get along well with your boss, they might give you maternity leave or like time off when you have a baby. If people know where you live and you know where they live, then you get along through this very personalized social contract. And where we set off with ILO's decent work, these pillars of decent work, and nobody had social protection and so on, minimum wage. So I see that there's a big gap between the national level discourse, where you assume that there is, or you expect there to be rule of law, law enforcement and so on, and then what's happening on the ground. And for me, my work is very much to do with a small scale on the ground level, where we hope for a functioning state, but we probably won't get it, at least not for a little while. So what can we do meanwhile? What are we doing during this time? So my plan is to use the TCA framework, the basic ideas, and use it with small agroecological producers for them to analyze their own work, their own products, and use it to engage with consumers. So I've already met many people in this conference who are doing similar work. It's fantastic. And I hope to build further on this. But so I'd just like to bring this to the attention of everyone, that I've heard the majority of the conversation here has been about how to use the data to influence policy, government policy, and then we hope to enforce and budget that policy later. And I'd like to speak for a parallel track at the sort of micro level, using these principles with an audience of on the ground actors. If anybody else is interested, let's have a final chat. Thank you. Bye.
Any reflections, Carlo? I mean, I think this like dynamic between building grassroots movements for change, I think that's what you're saying, and also strengthening social protection through policy mechanisms and through regulatory mechanisms and through international adherence to international agreements is a really central tension, right? So yeah, we'd love your reflections on this.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And in fact, my last point about legislation being present but enforcement being lacking is exactly the point you're getting at. So, and in fact, and that's why in our next iteration, yes, of course, we would like to interact with policymakers at the national level, but if something happens in the field, and if we would like to see change in the field at the farm level, we need to go to the field, right? So, but then the interaction is completely different. So, because what we are, I mean, what probably us in being sitting in DC or in Rome, we are used to is to interact with policymakers at the governmental level, while we are less experienced. I mean, probably I can talk to, for myself, but we are less experienced, for most of my colleagues, we are less experienced to interact with the communities. And it's a completely different level, and the messaging should be completely different, because I cannot show up with these graphs to a community and say, okay, these are environmental costs, social costs, and they will say, what are you talking about? So we would like, when we have over the few months, when we have this interaction with the communities, to work with institutions and with the association, with NGOs locally, to package the message together. And this will be way more effective than sitting in Nairobi or even worse in DC.
This takes me back to also the first round of lightning talks, where we had insights from there's the aligning forces using TCA to support social and environmental movements. I mean, this is also part of that movement building and local community building, connections across the local community to make change. And there are, I think, many people in the room here who are actively doing that, working at the community level. Any further questions or insights like that? I really appreciated your insight. Yes, Saskia.
Yes, thank you. I have a proposal or also questions mainly to Dimitri. I saw that you are taking up the work on TCA for the regional office for Europe and Central Asia. I think that's great. And you had, in your slides, you had some steps forward that you proposed, and you were even also mentioning that you welcome comments on these. So I have one comment and question to you, if how you see it. So the first one was to assist countries to integrate TCA in their regional strategic planning and policies. I think that's a great point, and I would just propose to add also sharing experience on these strategic plannings and policies, and also regarding the implementation, because we know that the implementation part is often the most difficult one. So that's one proposal, and then maybe as part of this, we could also have a discussion within the region on maybe potential needs on coordination, be it on the regional level or also on a global level. And yeah, so would be interested in hearing your thoughts if you think that would be a possibility to integrate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I was more or less very much interested in your experience, and we exchanged on that last year while preparing SOFA, and I was keen also to start promoting your experience with online presentation to our regional audience when we have the consultations with the governments. And we already had one event. I welcome this idea, and thank you for highlighting that sharing of that new experience about the plans, but also the implementation would be useful, and definitely I will address it in my slide with the new steps. Let me just remind you the vision for the next biennium. The idea was, of course, to try to do additional sub-regional case study for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thus, we will have 3 sub-regional studies covering almost all of the region that will put us in a good position to prepare perhaps a regional TSA-themed paper that we can put forward for the regional conference or the regional informal consultation taking in a scale within next 2 years. So, of course, having the discussion, we see a great potential having the platform, using the platform of regional conference and informal consultation as a starting point. But we'll also, I'm also thinking about other coordinative mechanisms that we can do. But I think if we have an event during the conference, that would to some extent help us to institutionalize the discussion regarding the coordination. If we see to what extent there is a greater number of countries perhaps interested. At the moment, I mean, texture-wise, we are not yet ready to distribute the material. I mentioned that we noticed that we need to develop some material available not only in Russian language to distribute in Central Asia or to use it in South Caucasus, but we also need actually the material available in the country languages. So we will try to develop some and see how it goes. So we also learn with that, and for that we need definitely the texture. And so that's why I said that the Western Balkan case study, if we succeed doing that, that it will produce some material that will cover each country independently as well, and that will help us to prepare perhaps some one-pager briefs that we will be able to pitch with the NGOs and also discuss with the experts there. Thank you for both points. Well received. Thank you so much.
Yeah, a wonderful question and response, and a great strategy to think about moving forward. So it's already seems like you're in conversation about regional sharing, exchange, platforms, collaboration, and maybe there's interest in other regions as well. We have time probably, yes, for a couple more questions. Go ahead, Rosina.
Thank you very much. My name is Rosina from Pelham Kenya Network. I want to share our experiences in Kenya as a network of 63 civil society organizations. One of the things we have seen being successful is having a social movements approach, whereby we do a lot of multiplication of knowledge, and we are also able to scale up best practices through the network approach. And we have also seen another strategy of policies being a catalyzer, not only at national level, but even at subnational levels, because like in Kenya, last year we have since launched a national agroecology strategy, and that has made many counties to be even interested in agroecology. And there are also a lot of other stakeholders, including private sector, who are now also interested to support some of these beneficial agricultural processes. The other aspect that I want to share about is also documenting cases and being able to showcase the benefits. And this has also been very helpful through the researchers being able to come in and employ the transdisciplinary and participatory action research methods, so that it's basically problem solving that is also engaging farmers and working with farmers. We have seen those being very successful cases in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosina. And then Claire, maybe we could kind of connect Rosina's comments and ideas, strategy ideas, really important strategy ideas to the work that you've done as well, because I'm interested in your experience in mobilizing, consumers, people, different stakeholders around the idea of externalities. I mean, this is a common theme through these presentations, is how, I mean, sometimes it's very daunting, actually, child labor, the kind of egregious practices that are driving up these costs. How have you mobilized, what's been your experience? You've done this really well. What's been your experience in mobilizing people around the idea of externalities?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Big question, but and I think what you also mentioned, it's non-linear. So that's also in this case. So there's opportunities that happen where you really have to be sensitive for, and then jump into at the right time. So if there's a time when the government is more sort of open to new true cost accounting ideas, I mean, that's the time for you to jump in there, and then sort of the ball goes rolling, and there's no way back. Even though governments change, things have been set in motion. And what I've really seen is, like, when things are in motion, even if it's small, like it's I think like from motion, it stays in motion, like it doesn't stop. So, and I think that's what you really see in the Netherlands. Like with the opening of the first supermarket in Amsterdam, with the first true price supermarkets. It inspires internationally, like the New York Times also wrote about that. Then it affects into government that come look at that local supermarket, bigger retailers go look at that supermarket, like what's happening here. It's new in retail. So such a small step really can have quite a big effect on society. And yeah, but I feel you really need to look at all levels. So you have really showing that it can work. And then you can go from municipality, like really local level, to a country, Europe and UN level, and then use the strength of all your partners in the system that have the best sort of engagement on those platforms. So really, I think also use the strength of this community to take that forward.
Great. We are at time for this session and want to transition into the kind of surfacing of ideas to take the work forward. I think that's the next session, if I'm reading the agenda correctly. I'll just end by talking about 3 themes that I think carried through both the discussion and your presentation. I want to thank you all, the 3 of you both, so much for sharing your important work. I think one of the key themes is the strong analysis that you've led. I mean, really, you're making the case. You're communicating the relevance. Why should we pay attention to externalities? What is the data telling us that we need to do? And communicating that to the relevant stakeholders. The other is bridging gaps. You just talked about this, Claire, really carefully. It's also related to the conversation around how do we hold these like big shifts that need to happen to adhere to our international standards while building movements and making change, meaningful change on the ground, and coordinating, bridging across, efforts, coordination, regional platforms, et cetera. And then the third theme that I observed in this is the theme of building a movement, building movements. Many of you or all of you are involved in that. And then also, Rosina, just your comment around, how you're bridging social movements, community-based movements to private sector and creating a broader platform for change. So thank you very much. That was a really interesting session on strategies for scaling implementation. And I really appreciate you sharing your work with us. So on to the next conversation. Thank you.